Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc, and welcome to Identity3, a podcast all about identity and Web3. And it's my great pleasure to be joined today by Martin Kuppinger. Martin is the founder and Principal Analyst of KuppingerCole. Welcome, Martin, and thanks for making the time to speak to us today.
Welcome, Nick, and everyone listening to this podcast, and thank you for inviting me.
Very much our pleasure. Martin, let's kick things off. Could you, first of all, please introduce yourself and then also your company, KuppingerCole?
KuppingerCole Analyst is an industry analyst firm. We're headquartered in Germany, but working globally. And we are focusing on identity management, digital identity, and cybersecurity only. So we are really very focused on these three areas. This is our business. And we do what industry analysts do. So we do research like our leadership compass, where we compare vendors in different market segments. We do events like the European Identity Conference, which runs every year, around mid-year in Berlin. We do some level of advisory. We don't touch systems because we're really independent and vendor neutral. I myself, I'm one of the founders and acting as the principal analyst, so heavily involved in our research. And have a long history in identity management. So I think I started back in the late 80s with early NetWare and LAN manager versions and Banyan Wines and things like that. A lot of people probably don't remember anymore. And from there, I've sort of always were close to the identity segment, which has fundamentally changed since then. So when we look at decentralized identity today versus old network operating systems, some 3 decades ago, a lot of things have changed, and I have seen a lot.
Also, was reading this morning, Martin, that I should congratulate you on 20 years. I think KuppingerCole has been in business for. So kudos for that. Not many businesses. I think it's 80% failure rate. So although that's a pessimistic tone, KuppingerCole is obviously in extremely good shape. So congrats for that.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And also, I was reading as well. I think you've written over 50 books as well. So you're a fairly prolific writer as well as kind of analysts. You're definitely keeping very busy, it seems.
You know, when you're an analyst, you need to be a good writer. I believe it is. You need to bring things to paper in quotas, and so you need to be a good writer. And yes, I did a lot of book writing stuff in the past, and maybe when I'm going more towards retirement, maybe I come back with some books. Not sure about that yet, but I love to write things and I love to talk about things. So yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, let's get down to it, Martin. So what is the business impact of doing digital identity right?
Yeah, that's I think a very, very good question, because, and I'd like also to differentiate a bit between IAM, like identity and access management, and digital identity. They are close, but they are also different. So IAM is really our traditional discipline of managing the identities of humans. We started with workforce, we added consumers and partners, etc., and things and services, and their access and governance aspects and security aspects, etc. Digital identity, I think, is a perspective where we talk way more about business enablement. So the potential of enabling things, and there are billions, trillions of digital identities out there because it's the humans, but it's also the things, the services, etc., that have digital identities. And we in a digital world, in a digital business, it all starts with the digital identity. There's the relationship aspect. So how do things relate to each other? Which digital identities of services, of things, of humans? I, as a human, have whatever, a smartwatch or a GPS-enabled watch for sports, and this is related to me and to apps and to other things, which requires IDs. But there's the other point. When you look at every digital journey, it starts with me becoming from unknown to known, to have sort of an ID and identity from the perspective of the business. So you can't do digital services. You can't succeed in the digital journey without having a good grip and doing it right with digital IDs. And, just look at drop-off rates during onboarding in e-commerce, churn rates, people not coming back. And it's what we do every day. So we think, oh, I'd like to go there back again, whatever, to this wine shop. Oh, I forgot my password. Spot the error, password. Anyway, but it means it makes it still difficult to me. And if you're better in dealing with that, then we will be more successful in business. If I could just come back and not think about this, just do my business, I would do it. I probably would do a lot more business with more entities that are specialized instead of very few, very big ones.
Yeah, and so the business impact there is really, it's almost like you're saying that you almost, in the modern age, you almost can't do business without a progressive, well-considered digital identity strategy.
Yes.
And there's a lot of regulations and things happening now, Martin, in the digital identity space, and almost kind of moving into other aspects of identity, like kind of self-sovereign identity is one way to express that. And so we're seeing things like eIDAS come through, kind of regulations mandated to the EU member states. There's things like the EU wallet coming through as well. And these all present risks, but they also present significant opportunities as well for companies working within this space. So what are you seeing as the most significant business opportunities presented by these up and coming regulations and technologies?
We definitely must look at the opportunities that are in there. And I think with the UDI wallet, so the EU Decentralized Identity wallet, as a place to keep proofs about who I am and a lot of other attributes, we are getting some, we see it, the EU driving things. And this is very close also to what I have been talking about just now. So it can, done right, and this is the important point, done right, it can make my life much more, it can simplify my life as a user. If I have a wallet which contains all my proofs, which says this is Martin, which is proved by something which is represented via his eID card. If I have the proof of I'm working at Principal Analyst, if I have whatever proofs from my bank, from other things, then business will massively simplify. And this is the huge opportunity that I say, I have everything here. I don't need to authenticate to register again. It's all in my wallet, one of my wallets maybe. I present it and I can use it. And this makes a lot of things way simpler than they are today, where I need to register on every single website. So I own my identity, I can share it, and I don't need to recreate it. It's a fundamental shift from a central to a decentralized model. A central model with thousands or millions of entities, organizations trying to have the identity of their customers, they consume it, they have it in their system of records, what they need, but I control it. And this is, I think, the paradigm shift, which is important. The big challenge I see is to really make this work globally and super, super simple. So it must be very easy for me. And it must be, and that also includes, it must be, I would say, risk adaptive. So if I do something simple, I just want to use my fingerprint to open my wallet. If I have a high volume financial transaction to do or something very important with my government, I may say, okay, I add another proof. I put my eID card to the RFID reader or the NFC function of my smartphone, and that's it. So this is what I'd like to do, and it must work globally. So it must work for everyone, because I, as a human, I do business globally, not only with European companies. But I think we have an extremely interesting evolution here. I personally also prefer the term decentralized identity over self-sovereign, because self-sovereign is, the sovereignty part is a bit, too many meanings of that. Anyway, so this is, Nick, a bit of my thoughts here.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, the self-sovereign term, not everyone is a fan of sovereignty in the way it can be meant as well. So yeah, decentralized definitely takes that part out of it as well. What can companies do, Martin, then to prepare for this? And I guess we've got companies and also kind of government regulations coming in. How can, and like you said, like a paradigm shift in terms of how these identities can be either delivered or stored. How can companies prepare in this shifting landscape?
So the first thing is learn. You need to understand what this is about. So what are we really talking about? And to also surely look at some of the things that are evolving. What do they mean? How are they implemented? As far as regulations are concerned, it's usually a wise spent time, even while it's a bit of an daunting task to read through regulations to understand what do they mean, even while these regulations usually are a bit unclear in the exact details then, but it still helps to spend a bit of time. But I think the most important thing is, I had a very interesting conversation with someone just recently about the disruptiveness versus non-disruptiveness of decentralized identity. And I think this is a very interesting point, because decentralized identities are disruptive in the sense of they potentially enable us to do very different things, or things much better. So they are disruptive to approaches we had. We don't need to manage every identity the same way we did. We don't need to register people. We just consume information from a wallet, which is a disruption to the way we did it for decades, since e-commerce was introduced. It's very disruptive, but it allows us to do things differently and better. And this is a positively disruptive potential to do business, digital business, in a very, very different manner. On the other hand, it's non-disruptive. You can add decentralized identity very well to the identity management systems you have. It's just replacing your standard registration authentication process. It's just another means for registering and authenticating in that sense. It's just another connector, however you'd like to phrase it as a tech person. And the same manner, it can be very well integrated into enterprise IAM. Imagine you improve the onboarding process of employees, which frequently are somewhere offsite, because in today's world, not everyone walks into offices. Imagine you just can say, okay, I have to prove that it's Martin. It's a good proof. And I can directly load, so to speak, or consume this proof that it's really Martin. This is his address from his eID card. UDI wallet, eIDAS, etc. behind it. Then my process of onboarding employees will become much faster and smoother, and I save money. I save money by reducing process cost. Same for onboarding partners. We have a huge challenge nowadays in supply chain management, supply chain risk, etc. We can improve a lot of things, and it integrates with what we have, but it can improve what we have as well. And I think we must not be concerned about disruptiveness, but understand it will not break what we have. It can expand, so to embrace and extend, so to speak, what we have, but allow then for disruption and doing things from enterprise identity management to digital business so much better than ever before that we really must spend our time learning about what it means.
And yeah, I think the disruptive part, I think people typically don't like change. And so sometimes we need to push through that and know that, or have strong instincts that something's going to be better. It just requires time to educate yourself and get used to it. But it's fundamentally a better thing. So we should push forward and push against things like that. So
maybe let me quickly bring up one point here. I've been in the identity business for 3 decades, and I've never seen something so positively disruptive in the sense of enabling without breaking than decentralized identity. So it's the biggest paradigm shift and the biggest opportunity beyond identity, really into the digital business. And I think this is what we need to understand as a starting point for the journey.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's great because it is also good for, businesses, like you said. It minimizes the work that they would need to do, the level or the volume of things that they need to manage that they would already manage today. But also it has that benefit to the individual of enabling them to start controlling this information, controlling their access, and controlling who has access to their data. So I think it certainly seems like a win-win. We just need to overcome the kind of education that's obviously required at the front end of that change.
Yeah.
And so one of the great things that enables is something that has been termed kind of reusable identity. So, using identity that's given for one thing, enabling the individual, like I said, to control it, and then to be able to use that in different use cases than maybe what it was originally intended. What impact do you see reusable digital identity technology having on the digital ID landscape, Martin? Obviously, you're very enthusiastic about it. Could you talk through that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, so I think this reusable part is really the charming thing. I talked a bit about drop-off rates, etc. So every one of us knows that. So you're going to somewhere and you say, okay, that is interesting. I'd like to buy it. And then you say, okay, I need to enter all that data again. And then sometimes you say, okay, I'll go somewhere else where I already have my account. So some of these things became a bit smoother by saying, check out via PayPal or something like that. But it's still something which is in some sort of hindrance. And if we can overcome this, if we are also automatically authenticated, if this all builds on the most current information, so proofs also can become invalid, they can become outdated. We have control about it, what we share. So also these annoying, I think I envision in a couple of years, hopefully earlier than later, we will also hopefully get rid of all these annoying cookie banners on website, because we can control what we share. We can control this via our proofs, because behind all this then sort of contracts derive. And this will make this much easier. And so it will remove hurdles. And at the end, there's also a cost associated for every business in maintaining information. So who are your active customers? The data still current? All that stuff is also causing cost. And so not needing to do everything yourself simplifies a lot. You can be faster in delivery, better in delivery.
But adoption of new technology always comes with some challenges as well. We talked about disruption, or you mentioned disruption a moment ago, Martin. What are you seeing as the challenges for, I guess, not only organizations, but also maybe individuals in the identity kind of space? What would they have to overcome, do you think?
Yeah, so I think to make full use of this technology and to integrate it easily, it depends very much on where you stand today. So if you have a good, modern, flexible architecture, it's easier to incorporate this. If you have a lot of legacy stuff, for instance, in your e-commerce system, then it may be more difficult to implement a new way for people to come in and to share information, and etc. So it depends a lot on what you have. The same holds true for enterprise IAM. So imagine you have the proofs which say, okay, this is Martin, he's working at this client currently in this project and this role. You can build your authorization on that, whatever Teams folder, which SharePoint site is Martin allowed to access. If you have the technology in place for such a policy-based, attribute-based authorization. Again, it depends on where you stand. So not everyone will be able to utilize the full potential from the beginning, because it's also part of the modernization of your legacy, so to speak, legacy consumer applications, really moving to modern digital services, so modern architecture. That is one part of it. The other part of that is clearly also the user side. The user side is, I think the biggest hurdle is that we go over the top with security. I'm a big believer in security. Don't misinterpret me here. But we always need to think about what is the required level of security. I touched this before. So if I just want to do a small e-commerce transaction, the security requirements probably are a bit lower than for a big financial transaction. For a lot of governmental interactions, there are low requirements because I just whatever want to access this form or do that or that. For others, it's a very high requirement, and we need to understand that the way we can use this are adequate. So if you always need to whatever pull out our eID card and hold it to the NFC or to the smartphone for NFC communication, then it's cumbersome. So we need to understand what do we need when in a realistic manner. And I think there's a bit of a tendency in when you look at some of the bodies involved in standardization to be very, very security centric. I think the same is like with identity verification, identity proving. So what is really needed here? And we need to think in levels of assurance at the end of the day. So what is the level of assurance we have for something and what do we need? And most of the stuff we do is a low level assurance thing. A few things are high level of assurance. And this must map. And the other thing I think which can be a breakpoint is, or two other things. The one is, I don't believe that there will be one wallet. I have more than one digital identity, at least business and personal, minimum 2. So I need 2 wallets, but I don't want to run through this annoying video ident processes more than once. So I want to reuse a proof across wallets. That is very important to me. I also want to have a situation where when I switch my smartphone, I easily can say, okay, here I have my wallet again without any complex things I need to go through. It just should roam, so to speak, with me. I should be in control of that. This is really super essential. And then there's the part of the world is global. And we will see wallets coming with browsers, coming with operating systems, etc. I want to have a free choice. And if it then ends up with I can do 95% of the things I'd like to do with a standard wallet, but for 5% with governments, etc., I would need another wallet, then this would, for instance, clearly disrupt e-government adoption. So the wallet is not the point where this thing is decided. The wallet is just a tool. What is important is how we use that information, how we communicate. So the standards are essential between wallet and the target. And the integration. And there's no business in the wallet, no real business. The business is in the digital business, in getting better there. And for some, it's in the integration of this technology into the existing world. But it's not in being the dominator of the wallet.
Yeah, it was interesting when you were talking there, Martin. I was thinking about, I recently verified my identity on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've gone through that process. And when doing that, I had to take a selfie and I had to basically scan the near field chip on my passport as part of that process. And I was thinking through the kind of 5 or 10 minutes that it took because it didn't work the first time, much easier if I could just upload a verifiable credential to LinkedIn. So yeah, I definitely agree that things are going to get better there. And yeah, I mean, to have, I guess, identities that are not only wallet agnostic, but also kind of phone agnostic, I guess that's where we should all be headed.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit at the start of, sorry, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I think the point is if people like you and me, which are both, I would say, tech savvy, struggle with something, then it's wrong. Then it's broken. So if you and me struggle with things like identity verification, then something is wrong. And then we at least must minimize it if there's no way to overcome it. But ideally, we fix it.
I think as well, I sometimes wonder as well with new technology, and I've been in this kind of the space you would call it decentralized or blockchain or Web3, whatever the flavor of the month is for some time now. And I think it's sometimes a little unfair where it's often compared to how did it work in Web 2 or these early technologies and how the user experience is not quite as good. And the reality is when you're making fundamental changes to how something works in the infrastructure, it does take time to go through all the learning of the user experience. You have to go through it all again. So sometimes to compare like a kind of this new technology that we're using with today's technology and how smooth that can sometimes be can sometimes seem a little fair. I think a lot of this process will get a lot better over time. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm positive on that.
Yes, yeah, I think we both are. I think we'd be in the wrong jobs if we weren't, Martin.
Yes.
So that's good.
True.
I think at the start of the conversation, we split up. Yeah, we split up a little bit. We started talking about identity, and you talked about IAM, identity access management, and you did a good job of like kind of differentiating between the two. If we can then go back to IAM just now, I know you've talked about it or mentioned it a few times through some of your kind of recent answers. Maybe you could kind of redefine again just IAM and what that is and how it relates to identity, and then maybe expand into what are the most common mistakes made in projects or technologies or companies focused on identity access management.
Yeah. So as I've said, I think it makes a bit sense to differentiate between IAM, which is really the enterprise workforce, etc., internal thing. How do I deal with the identities? How do I control access? A strong governance perspective. So factually, when I started, this was very much about synchronizing accounts. So things like meta directories, etc. It was a very administrative thing. Then we added a bit of user experience like single sign-on. Then with more regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley Act, in the around 2008 governance and recertification and things like that became way more important. And so we moved forward and we then moved towards identity security also as a very common term, which is really about identity playing a very central role in cybersecurity. And it's, I think, a very, very close relationship here because security starts with identity. It starts with Martin authenticating. So the entire zero trust journey starts with identity and it ends with controlling access. And then we see that there's also this impact on the digital business. And this is then really where it moves to more the digital ID field, but doing the things right within the enterprise. This is including the security aspects. This is what I would say is the IAM part. In some sense, the enterprise IAM part, because it's done by enterprises, by organizations. And the other is the digital ID part, which is really for the digital business then. So us as individuals dealing with whichever type of organizations, be it my favorite football club, be it an e-commerce dealer, be it my government, or whatever. And so this is the distinction I would make. So when we look at enterprise IAM, long history, and you're right in sort of, in some way saying, it's not a simple area because a lot of projects tend to stall there. I think one of the challenges identity management in the enterprise IAM has, it's always cross-divisional. So you integrate different applications that are owned by different people in the organization. You deal with different use cases, and this is a starting point. So projects that are cross-divisional always are more complex than projects that run in a sort of very isolated area. That is one part of that. You have to deal with a lot of applications from good old legacy to very modern SaaS services. So I know enough in organizations which have everything from RegF on the mainframe to a lot of modern SaaS services. And there's many of these services are different, and many of these are unfortunately not very good, because especially the older ones and having to write APIs, etc. These services all tend to have their own entitlement and access control models. So again, a lot of variety, and this makes it relatively complex. But I think what are the common pitfalls? When we look a bit at the pitfalls, and this is not a fully extensive list here, but one is really, I think it starts always with understanding what you want to do. So having a blueprint. We created a couple of years ago the term and the concept of an identity fabric. It's something which really takes a holistic perspective on identity management across all the types of identities, so humans, non-humans, to all the services and the different capabilities. This is quite broadly used nowadays. And I think this is a starting point. You need not to work in isolated areas, but you need to have a picture in mind, and then you need to split it into smaller steps you are doing. You need clearly the budget. You need the people. which is also very tricky. You need to understand your requirements of today and the future. You don't need to be too tool-centric. I see too many projects which start with the tool and not with what are my requirements, what are of today and the future, what are my processes, or policies, what are my processes, etc., and then come to the tool. So this is a risk. I think one of the things which also leads to a lot of challenges is many areas in identity management take a while until they are delivered. So if you have a project that runs 2 years, then the people spending the budget get nervous at some point, and this is way ahead of the 2 years. So you need to demonstrate quick wins as well as big wins. I think this is very important, quick and big wins, to have both, to demonstrate progress, to have a good stakeholder management, to talk with the people. These are all things which are very important, and you can make every identity management project a win and a success. But you need to be good. It's surely one of the more complex areas of running projects.
Yeah, I think as well, like what resonated when you're speaking there, Martin, was, and something that we try and hopefully avoid at Doc as well, is you see a lot of people in the, or a lot of organizations and also people in the decentralized identity space who have clearly and understandably fallen in love with the technology. But then, like you say, they fall in love with the tool and they definitely lose sight of the use case, or even how can they as a business actually make money? What problem are they solving for businesses? So it was interesting to hear you say that, because that's something that I've come across a little bit before as well. So it was certainly good to hear that. And I think also becoming agile or maintaining that kind of level of agility as well is important, isn't it? Like maintaining that startup mentality where you ship often and you might not ship the perfect thing every time, but you're shipping something to demonstrate progress, like you said.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have a sort of a split mind regarding agility. I think it makes a lot of sense to have smaller steps and move forward. The risk is, and I think a lot of people interpret agile as, I just do something without a plan. Let's phrase it a bit maybe harsh here, but you need a good architecture. And this architecture must grow. An MVP must be constructed in a way that it can be expanded to the next level. It means there are some things in the architecture, some things in the frameworks you have around that are required to make this work. So you need to set the right sort of foundation and borders to work within these with your agile methodology, and not in a totally free space. And I think this is very important also for identity management, because it's nothing which happens on a fully green field and isolated from everything else. But yes, I think you need to be agile. You also need to be very methodological. So one of the things one of the problems since decades in identity management is application onboarding, because you connect to a lot of applications in managing identities and access, in authenticating, in privileged access, etc. So multiple areas for application onboarding. And at the end of the day, you can standardize a lot by understanding what are the common patterns. So there are connections via web services, via LDAP, via a few different ways and different models. And if you standardize that and then do it in a repeated manner, then you can be very agile in adding one application after the other. But if you end up with reinventing the wheel again and again, then you will lose. So you need to find a very good balance here to do things right. And yes, you need to reflect, am I doing the right things? I think this is true for everything. Does my architecture withstand change? Is it made for the future? Which is, I think nowadays when we look at modern architectures, microservices, APIs, containerized, etc., it's way simpler than in the past, because we can scale much better if you don't make too fundamental mistakes. But yes, we need really to understand a lot of things and to be good to succeed.
Yeah, it's almost like using kind of constant retrospectives of what have we done and where you constantly evaluating what have you done and where are you going is something that's very simple to do, but certainly very necessary. you talked about a few different things, Martin, there in terms of what companies can try and do to overcome these challenges. Is there anything else in terms of advice that you give to organizations looking to maybe modernize their existing identity governance infrastructure and administration?
Yeah, I think really look at the big disruptive or potential as positively disruptive things. So what is it? And also look back and think about what is the root cause of challenges you have in identity management. I think one of the root causes, and probably the root cause of a lot of bad in identity management, are standing privileges. So managing entitlements in the systems which say this is Martin who has access to this folder or this function, business function, etc., is a daunting task. It is why we then created role models, which again are very complex to create and to maintain, and especially to keep track with the changes of the organization. This is why we do recertification. I've never seen any organization globally where the people said, hey, I am really waiting for the next round of recertification. It's so much fun. It never happens. And if this is the case, if something always breaks, then we need to rethink it. And I think we need to, and there's, for instance, more real-time authorization, policy-based access controls, which are where we have a lot of technology. In some places, some areas, we are closer to that. If you look at developing digital services and things like OPA and other evolutions, there's a lot of opportunity already. For legacy, it will take a bit longer, but we need to think about it. And the same holds true and brings us back to decentralized identity. It can help us doing things much better than we did in the past, and so evolve. So the art at the end of running or doing identity management projects is to have a picture which takes into account where do we stand, where do we want to be, and so also understands where do we need to act first and what are the bigger changes we can do. So not just doing what we did in the last 10 or 15 years the same way, but thinking about, okay, where do we need to do this just to fix the problem we have now? But how do we move forward from there? As I've said, we have a framework here, Identity Fabric, which definitely helps in doing that, which is very proven. This can help you in on the journey. But the most important thing is really, I believe, being open-minded and think beyond and specifically look at what is always challenging. And if, as I've said, if something always tends to cause problems, then we need to think about, can we do it really in a different way? Not how do we do a better recertification, but what can we do because of the symptoms? What can we do about the cause? And yes, we need to comply. So we have the regulations, we need to figure out solutions where the auditor says, oh, that's fine with me. But we can do that.
Yeah, I think following compliance, I think you're mentioning that with regards to the eIDAS regulations before, and like you said, they can be quite onerous to read through. But I think I've certainly found not only reading them, but potentially also looking at others' providing commentary and their perspectives on the regulations also helps increase understanding. So, working through regulations and working with compliance is definitely key. So, yeah, very good advice for businesses. Martin, you've been in this space for a very long time. I think you mentioned maybe 3 decades or so. Specifically with regard to kind of identity access management. Looking into the future, where do you see things going in terms of trends for maybe this coming year and then slightly beyond? Do you see any big kind of significant changes happening?
Yeah, so I think the trends are, so to speak, already visible. It's decentralized identity with all around. It's policy-based access controls, which really see a lot of gaining a lot of traction here. I think, and it's orchestration, as if I would need to name 3. Orchestration enabling us to connect the different pieces we have in a much smarter manner than we did before. And so decentralized identity also is related to all the broader Web3 area for sure. So this is where we're probably as parts of your world come together with parts of my world. Not that I'm ignorant towards Web3. And by the way, I also believe the decentralized identity is super important for everything which is about Web3 security. So Web3 still being a bit fuzzy and a lot of components. But if we want to solve security, then it's how do you solve security for the different aspects within that? And the common denominator is decentralized identity. So to address this, you need to address the decentralized identity challenge first. And then you will be much better in solving Web3 related security challenges.
Another thing that was a phrase I was actually unfamiliar with as well, but when we were researching kind of questions for this episode, AI identities is something that we came across. Could you unpack that for us a little bit as well, please, Martin?
Oh, yes. How much time do we have left? No, AI identity is something I used as a term because we have AI and we have identity. And I think there are two aspects. One is, which is looked at quite frequently, which is using AI in identity management. We see more impact of generative AI nowadays to really augment users. And I think this is a lot of AI is really about augmenting intelligence, augmenting people into doing things better. And Gen AI with prompt books can help people to be more efficient and also to sort of, to a certain extent, address the skills gap. We have analytical aspects already in many areas like identity, threat detection and response. And then we have the other side of the coin. And that is, we see more and more happening where AI is used also in building things that act on our behalf. So call it avatars, call it whatever. And so we have it's Martin, and we have my digital double, maybe. The digital twin term, unfortunately, is already used in another area. So we have my digital double. And we need to deal with identities here because this is Martin. And there's a digital representation or multiple digital representations of Martin increasingly acting on behalf of me. Think about the metaverses, plural. They will not be the metaverse. There will be, and there are already many metaverses. And there will be things, or my vehicle, when I enter the vehicle, my connected vehicle acts on behalf of me, powered by AI. And then we are talking about something that must have an identity that relates to my identity and that does things on behalf of me, but not gets out of control. And this is an area where we need to spend a lot of thinking. But on the other hand, I believe that this identity thinking is the core for solving all the cybersecurity and liability, etc., challenges we are facing when we connect things and when we bring in AI to have things acting more autonomously, because they're acting autonomously. And this is the clue really we have here. So this is in a nutshell is my thinking about AI identity.
I've heard agents used, the digital twin's been used. I've heard agents being used a few times in relation to some kind of representation of yourself, which I quite like. And I guess as well, Martin, I don't want to get too into the weeds because it'd be very easy to do this. Like you said, we've only got a few minutes left, but even the impact of AI to augment and improve our online experiences. But of course, it has the opposing impact where actually you look at things like deep fakes being used to actually co-opt our identities or pretend to be us in order to access systems as well. So I guess with any of these new technologies, there's a nuance to it as well. It can help, but it can also hinder.
But I think the deepfake thing is something which is also very interesting. So when we look at cybersecurity, usually our problem is that an attacker needs one type of attack, one attack vector that works. We need to defend against everything. For deepfakes, it's a bit the other way around. An attacker needs to create something that is perfect, and if we apply AI to detection, we only need to spot one weakness, one mistake in doing that. So it's potentially much more difficult to create perfect deepfake than to spot deepfakes. So we are in a better position. So there are things where AI definitely is to our advantage if we do it right, if we mature here, because the perfect deepfake, specifically when it's more real time, it's incredibly difficult to create.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, use AI to detect AI as well. Excellent. Martin, I know that we're running short of time. I really do appreciate your, the time that you spent with us this morning. I certainly don't want to take too much of that. So, final thing then, I think that we talked a little bit before we hit the record button about kind of conferences and things that were coming up. KuppingerCole organizes the EIC, which is an event in Berlin coming up. I think it's at the start of June, isn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And so if our listeners wanted to find out more, where would they go?
Yeah, so EIC, it's already out for more than 15 years. It's Europe's, dare to say, leading identity-related conference. So in Berlin, June 1st to 7. Last year, we were quite a bit north of 1,000 people on site. So really big, a lot of opportunities to make contacts. And I would say everything we discussed today and a lot more is on the agenda. So we will have 6 tracks, as I believe. So we will have quite a lot of tracks, keynotes, and other things. And it's really a great place, as I believe, to gather with the community, to exchange about it from vendors and analysts and end users to people that are driving the standards. So a lot of the people who are really driving identity standards, who are behind all the decentralized identity, always are at EIC. Some things even have their roots at EIC. So OpenID Connect was in some way, from what I've heard, invented when some people met at EIC. So the very first steps. And so there's a lot happening there. It's a great place to gather. Very interesting conference, 4 days packed. You also can attend virtually or in a hybrid manner, whatever you need. But I think being in Berlin is cool and it's fun and it's a great event.
Yeah, excellent. I know Doc will be there for sure. And yeah, Berlin's a great city, so it's always fun to travel there. Any final thoughts, Martin, before we pack up? Anything you wanted to conclude or pass on?
Maybe the only thing, just to summarize, so don't be scared about what is on the horizon, what is coming, what is there as new stuff. Make use of it. See the opportunity in really leveraging your digital business by digital identity.
Very good. We'll end there. Martin Kuppinger, thank you very much for coming on Identity3.
Thank you for inviting me.